Generations, talking about my sports generations. As always, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Steve. Hey, everybody.
Howdy, I'm Mark.
So, for the last couple of episodes, many of you that have been tuning in, and appreciate all of you that are doing so. And as always, please like and subscribe. We've moved over to the YouTubes, so you're going to find us not only on Spotify, and you can find all of our episodes. Believe it or not, we have over 200 episodes that go back several years, but we're starting to put those onto the YouTube. So you're going to get a classic episode on YouTube every Wednesday. And then you're getting, of course, the new episodes on Saturday on the YouTubes. They post at noon for Spotify, but on the YouTube listeners and watchers, you get those at 6 a.m. Pacific time. So we always appreciate all of you. Please like and subscribe. But we're continuing our March Madness, where we had an influential sports person being represented by an actual men's NCAA team. And we are now at the Elite Eight. And we're going to kind of go through some of those folks that have kind of come all the way through and have a little discussion about that. Anything you want to add there, Steve?
No, it's a fun time of the year. The NCAA has changed in unbelievable ways in terms of the rosters being basically rebuilt every year. You got some old crony coaches, Patino and Calipari, who are trying to make their way through. I think, despite all the insanity of college sports, the NCAA tournament still works, and I'm not exactly positive why it works, but it does, and there've been some great games. So I'm ready to keep going on our tournament here, Stu.
I have a question before we get into it. Steve, can you talk about what the tournament was like many years ago? Just like early days tournament, if you remember.
So different. Well, I remember really well, and Jonathan and I have been over this a couple times, but it hit a soft spot because back then they had regions that meant something. So they had the West, the East, the South, and North, and that meant only one team came out of the West. And unfortunately for my generation, so I started watching in the late 60s, early 70s, all roads ran through UCLA, and no one got through UCLA. One year, USC, I believe when they had the backcourt of Paul Westphal and Dana Padgett, I think, or maybe it's Mo Layton. They're a great team. I think they lost one or two games all season, both UCLA. They don't get in at all. they didn't win their conference. They don't get in the tournament. In my hometown, Long Beach State, coached by no one other than Tark the Shark, Jerry Tarkanian, although he started at Fresno City College. First big college job was Long Beach State, and he had Ratliff, the Poindexter brothers, Glenn McDonald, who played with the Celtics. He had some real good players, and you see him around town. I actually played in pickup games against some of these guys. I mean, not necessarily against them. I may have been on the floor at the same time. But Long Beach State had great teams, but they could not get out of the West no matter how hard they tried. And everything went through UCLA. So in the end, you would get this tournament where it'd be UCLA out of the West. There'd be some out of the South that you'd never heard of. I mean, you'd heard of the school, Florida State or whomever, and they'd have these collection of nobodies. And then there'd be the Midwest, usually with a Big Ten team, often Indiana or something. But it's fun. And the regionals meant something. So you had to do it geographically. And like I said, all the good teams in the West Coast had the misfortune of never even getting to the tournament, or certainly never getting out of the Western regionals because of UCLA. I mean, UCLA won, I'm not sure if it was 11 in a row or 12 in a row or some ridiculous thing. And it was like the Connecticut women. I mean, they just dominated people. So I always found it really interesting. And Long Beach State played them 2 or 3 times in the conference finals. And one year was close, but usually it wasn't. UCLA was just too good. So it was interesting because I remember one year after they changed the rules, I think 3 or 4 of the teams were from the Big Ten. Now, of course, the power conferences dominate. But back then, geography meant something. And it meant that if you're in your region, you better be the best team in your region, whether it's the South or the West or whatever it is. And it just didn't matter if you were the number 2 team in the nation. If you the number 1 team in your region was there, you're screwed. So totally different and fun in its own way because the challenges were real early. I mean, SC got screwed because they couldn't even get to the conference because they couldn't win their conference. They couldn't get to the tournament. But Long Beach State and some of these other teams in the West, they were good. I mean, there was an argument that Long Beach State was the second and third best team in the nation, but they didn't get going. So it was a lot different and not unlike the pros. I mean, back in the day when there were just two conferences, there weren't that many games. I mean, there was a reason why the Lakers played the Celtics every year in the finals for a decade, because they're the two best teams in their conference, but they didn't have to fight it out. Now, and Jonathan makes a good argument that now it's much more difficult because, you have so many more rounds, teams get hot, there are all these things. But back then it was antiquated, it was fun, but it was very frustrating to be a Long Beach State fan.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's almost like you know, not quite a sliding doors moment, but really to think what Long Beach State would have been if geography wasn't really a hard and fast rule for the tournament. Like if they had an opportunity to make it to the finals every year, um, you know, that would be a different story for them.
I like the geography thing. I
he
think
had a
it's
big
cool.
cloud.
Yeah, I think it's cool that they do that. I mean, I realize that for ratings and everything else, you want the best teams, but I think there's something fun about having to fight your way out of your district. It just seems cool. But I think I'm the only one who thinks that.
Well, so Tarkanian had, the cloud at UNLV, goes to Fresno State later on, has the cloud around him there as well. Was there a cloud around him? Was there conjecture even back at Long Beach State?
Oh yeah, and that was just a tip of the iceberg because Tarkanian was like saying, look, man, the NCAA is a hoax, and you guys are totally wooden, disciples, and everything's favored for UCLA. And everyone knew, when I say everyone, people knew that there's this guy named Sam Gilbert back before NIL, back when you weren't supposed to pay players. Sam Gilbert was this wealthy LA business person who hooked up with UCLA very unofficially, and UCLA guys got what they wanted. And Tark got the guys who bounced around schools, maybe had a criminal jacket or something, and got him. And there was a big deal. Oh, he's doing something. And Tark's like, I'm like Mother Teresa compared to UCLA, but it never got very far. So yeah, Tark had a huge cloud on him the whole time he was at Long Beach State, and that's one of the reasons he left. And what's interesting is after he left, you guys might not know who replaced him. Lute Olson. Lute Olson was a nobody. He came in, and I think one year he went like 27-2 at Long Beach State. He was just phenomenal, and they continued it. But then he got a better offer at Arizona and split. But yeah, Tark had a cloud on the entire time because, and actually, this is semi-interesting. The clone of Tark was this guy named Bill Mulligan, who was a good friend of my father's. Tark and Bill Mulligan were the two most winningest coaches in California junior college, and they just dominated, and they did the same way. They got the guys who got kicked out of high school, who had bad grades, et cetera, and they took chances on them. And the joke back then was, you can go to a good park in Los Angeles or San Francisco and find five guys who could play major college basketball, and they could back then. And Mulligan and Tark just changed the way recruiting was done, changed everything, and they took all these guys. Tark took it to another level at Vegas and, got a lot more scrutiny, a lot more notoriety, and a lot more trouble. But Tark and Bill Mulligan were way ahead of their time, and the only counterpart, I think a guy like Calipari, takes chances on guys and does these things that are deemed somewhat perhaps risky or maybe even unethical, but they do that, and they found these players, and they get these guys. I mean, I remember the story for years was that, someone took Derrick Rose's SAT for him, and, he wasn't that good of a student, and although apparently now he's a great chess player, but all these things, and Tark got guys like that all over the place, and there's probably the best player no one's ever heard of was this guy named Eldridge Hudson, as they called him El Hut, and he came out of Carson. He was like a around Magic's time, he was like 6'9", who could handle the ball. But he was a rough player, and no one would take a chance on him except Tark. And if he hadn't blown out his knees as a freshman, I think UNLV would have won a number of titles. But Tark got all these guys that had clouds or baggage or whatever. He didn't get the goody two-shoes players. And that was way before its time. And Tark showed that these guys could not just do well, but contribute in their own way.
See, this is the magic of our show right here. Like, this is the magic. It's the stories that you tell of close to home. Your dad knows one of the coaches, right, who happens to hold one of the records, for California State Junior College. And then just the memory and being there when all of this happened. So, since we're on Tark, was it leaving Long Beach State before UNLV where he was potentially going to be the Lakers coach, or was it at UNLV that he was going to be the Lakers coach?
It was at UNLV. So he done his Long Beach thing, transferred to UNLV. I guess Lon Rosen, one of the people of the ancient Lakers, was involved. And yeah, there's a deal to make Tark the coach, and it's a really weird story, which I don't know all the facts of, but the fixer, the mixer, one of the guys with Tark who was negotiating was found dead and murdered in his car in a parking lot in Los Angeles, and Tark never got the job. And the funny is they did a press conference, and they did a press conference where Jerry West was named coach, but he's like, I'm not coaching. Pat Riley's coaching. So it was a hot potato. But yeah, Tark wanted they Lakers seriously wanted Tark, and I'm not sure Tark really necessarily wanted the job. But a quick story about Bill Mulligan, who only California people know. He ended up coaching UC Irvine, and UC Irvine got this guy like this. Like I said, this was so long ago, back in the day, where no YouTube, no tapes of everyone. There's this word of this kid out of, I believe it was Mississippi, 6'10", could shoot like anything, and had flunked out of school or got kicked out of school. Bill Mulligan got him at UC Irvine. His name was Kevin McGee. He had a cup of coffee in the NBA. He was actually a pretty good player. I think he was drafted in top 10. Didn't have a long career, but he had Kevin McGee. And I was a first-year law student in 1981 at University of Oregon, and Oregon played the Ducks. And I went over to Coach Mulligan to say hi before the game. And Oregon had a 7-footer named Blair Rasmussen, who used to hang around all the time, who was way ahead of his time. He was a soft guy, but he's 7 feet tall, and he could shoot from the outside. Of course, back then, no one cared if a center could shoot from the outside. You had to pound it down low. And Mulligan said, how's their big guy? Because, they didn't have tape or anything. I said, go right at him. He's soft. And first 4 or 5 times down, McGee just went at him and just used him. And it was a great game. Oregon actually won in the last couple seconds, but Kevin McGee probably went for like 35 and 20. So it was fun.
You were scouting. You provided the scouting report.
Exactly. Unofficial scouting report for Coach Mulligan. I don't know if he used it or not, but I'm sure he could have figured out after 10 seconds. Blair Rasmussen, I don't know if you ever heard of the guy, but I mean, he was a 7-foot center for Oregon who couldn't jump, couldn't really run well, but he could shoot it better than anybody in the gym. But in 1981, 7-footers did not go past the foul line. I mean, they were down low every time. And if he was in today's game, I mean, they'd be building statues for him, man. The dude's like what's the Russian guys on the Warriors now, Pachingas or whatever. It's like that. He could just shoot it. He had a great stroke. So, unfortunately they didn't let big men shoot back then.
Yeah, I mean, so, I grew up as a Knicks fan, and it was a big deal that, Patrick Ewing could shoot, the 15 to 18 footer. Like, that was a big deal. Like, he was considered a really good shooter for being a center, but that was rare. And those weren't threes. He was never taking a 3-pointer, and who knew if he could make it, but he was considered probably, at least for that era, one of the best big men shooters. And it's amazing to see how much the game has changed.
So Kristaps Porzingis, I think, is going to have a word. He is Latvian,
Yeah.
Steve. So he's not Russian. And there's a lot of Russian athletes that are currently playing as independent, so they're not representing the current Russian flag due to a lot of different political things. But so he's Latvian. But as an aside, would any of you like to venture a guess in the total number of 3-pointers ever attempted by our good man, Patrick Ewing?
8.
I'd say 0.
So you say 8. What do you think? He
I'll go
attempted
0.
125 threes and he made 19 of them. You must have some
Well,
kind of lag, Steve. Like your
yeah.
squirrels are still are a little bit behind. Go ahead, Mark.
I wonder how many of the, so you said 125 and he made 19, right?
Yes.
I I imagine most of those were the last second, I'm just going to heave the ball from half court or three quarters court because I can't remember a time during the regular course of play he was, coming off a screen for a three pointer.
So in the 93-94, he had 14 attempts. 94-95, he had 21. 95-96, he had 28. And then he never had double digits in any other season. So I don't know what was going on those 3 seasons on why he was taking more. But I'm sure you're right. The majority of them were last second. Oh, he's the only guy we could pass it to because he's tall enough, can keep the ball away. So he's going to chuck it up.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he was actually a better shooter. Again, he just was never asked to shoot,
Right.
and he
Yeah.
would have been benched had he
Yeah.
tried.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those. I mean, look at Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez, didn't he have a 40% year or something crazy like that a few years ago?
Yeah. He's really, we talked about in a different episode how he has really morphed his game as the league has changed. It's increased the longevity of his career. And it's a great sort of example of how the league changed, just looking at how his career changed and his strengths. Because with some of the big men, it's like they're fast and they're flexible and they can really come around screens and all that stuff. He's not doing it that way because he's built like more of the traditional big man, but now he just has got the range. And so I would say that's what I would picture if Patrick Ewing were shooting threes. It would be more in that style of Brook Lopez. And I bet Ewing could make those threes, but you're right. He would be benched if he were taking, because you said 20 a season, or he would have 20 a season the most. So that's like one every 4 games.
Right.
He'd be benched if he was shooting four every game. So,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So back to our tournament. We're in the Elite Eight. You've got the 1 versus 2 this is the East, I believe, in the East. So number 1 overall was Duke. They are represented by our number 1 overall, Muhammad Ali, and they're going up against number 2 UConn, who we definitely had as Willie Mays. This is your wheelhouse, Steve. I mean, give us some color on Willie and Ali.
Well, I mean, they're two phenomenal athletes, but I think you can't really compare them in the sense of who had a bigger impact. It was clearly Muhammad. Willie was a great player, maybe the greatest, but socially he was a quiet guy. He kept to himself. He didn't really do much in civil rights or anything like that. And he was just a gentleman. As an athlete, as a player, I think from what I've read, he was probably the most respected player in baseball. Just what he could do. I mean, he was a true five-tool guy from the beginning, and there's almost nothing he couldn't do. I think he may have changed how sluggers are looked at because he ran so well and he fielded so well. I mean, Mickey Mantle, Mays were always against each other when they came at the same time. They're both New York City, the whole thing until Willie moved to California. But Mantle never had the great defensive skills that Mays had. Willie arguably had the best arm in the league, maybe Roberto Clemente. But yeah, I remember seeing Willie Mays at Chavez Ravine when I was a little kid, 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and he was a pleasure to watch, and he was infectious, but he was just this guy. I mean, I think both of you've probably read about this or heard about this or maybe even seen this. The famous Juan Marichal John Roseburg incident. I mean, the Dodgers had a heated rivalry. So now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this somehow, maybe a little too young. Juan Marichal was like the Pedro Martinez of his time. Nasty right-hander, great pitcher, and was not afraid to brush guys back. And they were playing the Dodgers, and Sandy Koufax is on the mound, and Sandy Koufax did not like to pitch inside. He was scared he might hurt somebody because he threw so hard. So Marichal either plunked someone or was brushing Dodgers back, and they were on Sandy to retaliate, and Sandy wouldn't do it. So John Roseborough, the catcher, did. So John Roseborough, when Marshall was at plate, John Roseborough caught a pitch and threw it back right by Marshall's ear, really close. And they had words, and a scuffle happened, and Marshall plunked him with a bat, of all things, and cut him pretty severely, stitches, and the bench is empty. There's a famous picture of Willie Mays just kind of trying to be the peacemaker, and he was anguished that violence was break out on the thing. So Willie Mays, to me, was a real gentleman, not a provocateur, just a gentleman, phenomenal baseball player. And, I think probably the epitome of how good baseball was. But if we're talking for our brackets of impacts and things like that, Muhammad Ali was a world changer. I mean, there's so many things, so many firsts that he did that changed everything. The not just beating Sonny Liston when he was a young man, but giving up his heavyweight crown for religious reasons, getting imprisoned, which brings you back to like Jack Johnson, who got imprisoned, and then coming back and against all odds, having the fight of his lifetime against Joe Frazier in Madison Square Garden, which was probably the biggest sporting event of the 70s, maybe the biggest social event in New York City that year. And then coming back from that, I mean, he ultimately won. He lost the fight, but he won the trilogy with Frazier, and he basically destroyed Smoking Joe. And then he came back to be champ again. So it's just, Muhammad just did so much. I would say that in terms of impact on society, you have to give it to Muhammad. But they were two icons in very different ways. They kind of epitomize the old and the new. I mean, Willie came up. I mean, Willie played for, I believe, the Birmingham Barons. So he was in the Negro Leagues, and he understood, he understood racism, he understood segregation, he understood all these things. And it's funny, they're both from the South. Muhammad was from Louisville. Initially, it was called the Louisville Lip, but they approached it very differently. And Willie was far more eager to get along and do things his own way, and Muhammad was much more brash. But two huge icons that I had the opportunity to see. Willie in person, Muhammad on TV numerous times in the fights, and he really resurrected boxing, which was in the mid '60s through scandals and other things, was really down in the dumps. And Muhammad was not unlike Tiger, but on a bigger level. People wanted to watch it. Now, a lot of people wanted to watch it to see him getting beaten up, which almost never happened until he got older. But he brought an excitement to everything, and his relationship with Howard Cosell was like the beginning of this whole kind of thing with athletes and journalists. It's very fun. So I remember them both real fondly, and I think they had huge impacts. But I think Muhammad's was much more profound and a wider ranging than Willie's, who I wouldn't say just a baseball player, because he's maybe one of the best baseball players of all time, but it didn't transcend life like Muhammad's did.
I would say that there's differences. I think Muhammad's came, he's a decade younger than Willie Mays, and it was much different. The social times that were happening, Muhammad's coming in where you're having civil rights, you're having Martin Luther King Jr. And when you look at Hank Aaron and you look at Willie Mays, right, they come after Jackie Robinson, and they're playing, and baseball isn't fully integrated. They play a full decade almost before baseball's fully integrated. And so there had to be this quiet, I guess, being dignified, but being quiet about it, because they were the first, and they were had to represent a certain thing. And I've read things that Willie Mays was actually very down on it, where Hank Aaron was the opposite, right? He looked at it as an opportunity to kind of further the black player within Major League Baseball. But Willie, in many times, was really depressed and was really down on the whole deal. I mean, I've told this story before. When I lived in St. Louis, you have the Chase Park Plaza, which is this grand, was this grand hotel in St. Louis. And when the visiting teams came in, that's where they stayed. Willie wasn't allowed to stay there. And so he had to deal with that kind of stuff for quite a long time. So I think the difference is, Muhammad had this different platform, almost like today with social media. It was different. You had more television. And Muhammad was, I mean, let's call it, I'm not denigrating Muhammad Ali. We made him the number one overall for a reason. He is the greatest of all time. And he transcended his sport. I mean, I'm not going to debate that, but I wouldn't discount Willie. I think Willie just did it in a different way. And even though that he's only 10 years older, it was a significantly different time. I mean, you grew up in New York, Mark. I mean, you probably grew up with the stories of Mickey, Willie, Maris, Duke Snyder, stories. You didn't see those guys. Like, was your dad a big baseball fan? And who did? I'm assuming he was a Yankee guy.
Yeah. So my father was from Boston. So
Oh no!
yeah. So he was more of a Red Sox fan, but he wasn't like a huge sports fan. But he would watch sports when it was on. But he was a Red Sox fan. So I'd hear stories of just different ball players, but I didn't have enough knowledge other than just the public stories that I'd hear. Also, watching old episodes of Home Run Derby, the show that then ran on ESPN Classic, which I loved watching. So that was about it.
Yeah, the original Home Run Derby was what if you go back and I think you go on YouTube and find some of those episodes. They're actually
Yeah,
pretty. I think it was kind of interesting, and
I loved
they're
it.
also playing, and they're in empty parks. Like nobody's watching. It was just
It,
one on one kind of thing, right?
it's amazing to watch it and just see like how under commercialized that was. Like it was a big deal having the best players in baseball together in an empty ballpark
Empty,
with
yeah.
a pitcher who's just throwing BP pitcher, um one announcer, and when when it's not your turn to hit, you're just chatting with the announcer watching the other guy hit. you know
Right.
and there's an umpire down the left field line, down the right field line. That's it. It was there's something so charming about watching that. Obviously that's not the point of this conversation, but just had to bring it up because that was something as a kid I loved watching, those old episodes. And I thought it was so special to see it, but like very confusing even as a little kid to see like an empty ballpark, like you said, and just seeing like how accessible the players were, but also like kind of how nervous they were. Some of them were how stiff. Like they obviously weren't media trained. They didn't grow up with media the way that athletes do now. So it's a really, I think, important artifact of baseball in media to watch that show.
So was your dad a Yaz fan, or was he Ted Williams, or who was his guy? Do you know?
I don't know. We didn't like we would go to games, but he wasn't, and it would be on at home. I think because I would generally watch it, but like he would watch it, but he wasn't, a huge fan, and he didn't influence me to become a Red Sox fan or anything. That would have been pretty hard. And he probably also did
Yeah.
not want to punish me, and because back then it was like, geez, why do you want to sign up to be a Red Sox fan? So maybe he was trying to save me.
That's funny. That's
Yeah.
really good. So yeah, so you have Muhammad Ali was represented by Duke. Duke took down St. John's. That was Sugar Ray Leonard, and Duke took down TCU, which was represented by Bo Jackson. So we talked about Bo quite a bit in the previous episode. We didn't talk a whole lot about Sugar Ray. I mean, I remember those early '80s, those early '80s fights, Duran, Hagler, that kind of stuff. I mean, he was also gold medal winner. I mean, you got anything? You got any edited stories on Sugar Ray there, Steve?
Yeah, I remember Sugar Ray. I mean, he in the '76 Olympics they had a great U.S. had a great boxing team. They had the Spinks brothers and Sugar Ray, a couple other gold medal winners who all became champions. But Sugar Ray, had this whole gig where he was not going to go into box. He was not going to be a pro boxer. He had some other thing to do. But then they kind of got him in there. But I remember back in the day, in the must be the late '70s, maybe early '80s, they'd have some nights a fight of the month, and it usually be Sugar Ray. And he was so much better than the other guy. The other guy literally couldn't touch him. I mean, the other guy would never land a punch. Now, obviously, Hearns and Hagler and Duran, those are different. Those were guys his quality and his level. But the average guy, so if you've got the top 10 rankings, number 3 through 10, I mean, the disparity was so huge, and people weren't used to it because people were used to, and they changed boxing. They were used to kind of the slugfest, whether it's from Jake LaMotta all the way up to whomever. But Sugar Ray did the thing that Muhammad did, which was they were stronger and faster. They just they would fight fights, and it was never even a contest. They would never even consider taking a good shot because they were so much more skilled than the other guys. So yeah, Sugar Ray transcribed. And then I think I mentioned this one of the last things. His fights against Duran were just something. And I mean, they had where I lived in Long Beach at the time. I mean, it was the talk of the town. And I think I mentioned Dennis Hara, the Rams guard, had one of the first places where you could see a fight, and Legends Bar in Belmont Shore. And I remember when it was just jam packed, hundreds of people, all really into it. And that was when Duran kind of had his way with him. But the same thing. Leonard, won the trilogy and did his thing. So really, really accomplished fighter. How much he changed, how influential he was, hard to say, but amazing, amazing career. And then the thing I was going to say a little bit about Willie and Muhammad and Sugar Ray is, to me, it's just sad these guys, they kept going and going well after their prime. And I don't know if they did it I assume they did it for money. I mean, to me, one of the saddest things was, Willie Mays, stumbling for a fly ball with the Mets and, in his early 40s. It's just hard. And back then there was a big incentive to keep playing because of the money. They didn't have the generational wealth. And as bad as it was seeing Willie stumbling for a fly ball in center is nothing compared to seeing Muhammad fight Larry Holmes, and get a beating because his hand skill wasn't there and his speed wasn't there. So it's sad. It's kind of a lesson that I admire these guys who retire early and move on because they really saved themselves a lot of tough days.
Something that you just mentioned. So Muhammad Ali he ushered in the big fight being televised, because they weren't televised early in his career, and then later in his career, having these fights televised. So that was a big deal, and ABC and all of that. And then Sugar Ray was like the precursor to all the pay-per-view, right? So he just misses that next round of where these guys are getting paid significantly. And then Willie, same kind of thing. By the time salaries in baseball really started to jump, at this point, he's already done. And again, television is driving a lot of that revenue for these teams. And so he just misses out on that kind of next level. So I'm sure you're right. I think it's, hey, I got to get paid. And it's not like it is today. I mean, if Sugar Ray, fast forward 30 years, is he Floyd Mayweather? As far as, receipts, as far as money, as far as that kind of thing. And of course, if Willie's playing today, Willie's the best player in baseball. I mean, he's making more than Aaron Judge, or as much as Aaron Judge and Ohtani, right? Right, Mark?
Yeah, it's like almost sad to think about that you have these guys who paved the way, helped lay all the groundwork for where these sports are today, and then you think about how much they were paid versus what guys get today, what average guys get today. I think the most difference is probably in the NBA, right? Like, because now you get guys who average, you're getting 20 million a year for several years, and that's if you're an average guy and you sit on the bench a lot of the time. Like, it's sad. I mean, that's also going back to home run derby. That's why they're doing home run derby, right? Like, it's not worth their time if they're making the money that players are getting paid today. So yeah, obviously, like, they had ways to make money afterward because of their fame and what they did. But yeah, I try not to think about the fact that they really did not get paid what some average guys are getting paid today.
So we've got In the South, in the Elite Eight, we have number 9 Iowa, that was represented by Shaquille O'Neal, and then we have number 3 Illinois, represented by Jim Brown. So Illinois took down Houston. So famously, kind of a little bit of an upset. Number 3 Illinois beat number 2 Houston. Houston was represented by Tiger. And then Shaq takes down Ichiro. Ichiro was being represented by number 4 Nebraska. So you kind of have, you got Shaq and you got Jim Brown. Jim Brown, I know you got a lot of love for Jim Brown, Steve, and I only knew Jim Brown in the later years, and some of that not so great. So why don't you give us some of the good stuff?
Well, it's the same thing of separating the art from the artist. Jim Brown was arguably the best athlete since Jim Thorpe. I mean, apparently he was just a lacrosse player of unbelievable dimensions at Syracuse and could do anything. And, for a number of years, he was the best player in the NFL. And if you watch the films from those years, I mean, it was like a man among boys. I mean, they couldn't tackle him. He was just really amazing. And then, after that, he embarked on a very ambitious and illustrative career in a lot of different veins. I mean, he was a talent manager for singing groups. He was a movie star. He was a civil rights icon in his own way. He had numerous brushes with the law. An interesting one towards the end of his life, he ended up in Ventura County, actually ended up in the Ventura County jail for a year. And the backstory on that was that he had a domestic dispute with either his wife or his live-in, I'm not sure. And as happens quite a few times in criminal justice, for whatever reason, the woman, usually it's a woman, refuses to testify, says, like, I whatever happens between us, I'm not getting involved in the justice system. Well, anyways, Jim Brown was convicted, and when you're convicted of a misdemeanor, the judge says, I'm going to grant you probation for a number of years, which means we can stop you and search you and check you out and a small amount of jail time as kind of a deterrence to doing it again. Well, Jim Brown refused to accept probation. So the case was usually worth like a weekend, do a weekend in jail, maybe 5 days. Jim Brown refused to accept probation, so the judge, what we call maxed him out, which we gave him the max amount of time, which is 1 year. This is in Los Angeles, but Los Angeles didn't feel comfortable having Jim in the LA system, so they had to do his time in Ventura County Jail. And, it's not uncommon. I represented a number of people over the years that would refuse to accept probation on a variety of reasons. Either they were a little whacked out or they wanted to take a stand. Jim Brown's just like, no, I didn't do anything wrong, and no one's going to come to my house and look at my house just because I'm on this thing. So no matter what you thought of him, he had principles. How his impulse control was, I have no idea, but he was a very principled guy. And I remember when he just basic interviews with him, you could tell he was a deep man. And like I say, I don't profess to understand him in any way, but I respect him quite a bit, both on the field and off the field. And I think, to me, the biggest thing was, aside from his prowess on the field, how good he was. But, it's hard to imagine another guy who at the top of their game, at the very top of their game, give it up. He was MVP of the NFL the year before he left, and he left, and, he didn't miss a beat, because back then, they didn't have generational money. They made money, but it wasn't enough to live on the rest of their life. He rolled right into Hollywood. He rolled right into the Dirty Dozen, and he started to do movie after movie after movie. And he had a very nice career, and his lifestyle remained basically the same, just on stuff like that. So I think in terms of influence, he was a incredibly influential guy, just how he carried himself and what he did. And if you read much about Jim, he grew up in Syracuse, and his mother, one of these horrible stories is, his mom was a cleaning woman, and she cleaned the rooms of the houses of some of his college teammates, and just the indignities he must have felt. And then he gets drafted, he goes to Cleveland, and Cleveland was not the bastion of civil rights, and he had this life, and he did his thing. But then in his own way, he took over Hollywood. Now, he didn't take over Hollywood like Paul Newman or Robert Redford or something like that, but he was a star. He did a number of movies. He got paid well, and he did things on his own terms. And I always thought it was very funny. And when the NFL was not very big, he was actually a commentator, and the threesome was, I'm not sure it was Pat Summer or whomever, but it was George Allen, the former coach of the Rams and Redskins, and Jim Brown. And Jim Brown was really funny. And
Whoa, 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 whoa.
the
The
team formerly known as
Washingtons. Come on,
the
man.
Washingtons, and he would make these really subtle digs. That with his baritone voice, he'd say, "Isn't that right, Coach?" And have to laugh. And he and George Allen got along pretty well, it seemed. But Jim was funny, and the one thing I didn't like about Jim Brown was when Franco Harris was about to break his record, Jim threatened to come out of retirement, and they ended up having some made-for-TV thing where they competed against each other. And it's too bad because I thought Jim may have been above stuff like that, where you're not still competing. But he was a very he didn't like Franco Harris for some reason. He thought Franco Harris ran out of bounds too much. But yeah, in terms of influence, Jim Brown, in my opinion, was off the charts influentially.
Well, I mean, there's some racial tension there too because Franco Harris was considered, light skinned brother, and there's a lot of tension if you're looking at that period of time, right? You're talking about the late '70s when this was going on, into the early '80s, and I think there was some of that component where Franco was considered to be kind of like you said, a little soft, a little privileged as compared to maybe what Jim Brown kind of had to go through or felt or believed. Now, whether he was right or wrong, but there was some of that kind of tension that was kind of happening. So he's going up, represented by Illinois. He's going up against Shaq, number 9. I mean, Shaq comes into the league, and he immediately is right there in the crosshairs of your boys, the New York Knicks, and Patrick Ewing. So what do you remember growing up watching the Knicks playing those early Magics?
I was going to ask you. I want to hear from you. Like, what are I'll tell you mine, but I want to hear from you first. Like, what are your biggest sort of memories of Shaq, maybe in the early days of his career?
So I'm actually in Orlando. I'm living in Orlando. I'm in the Navy. I'm going through the nuclear power training school. So I go to basic training in Orlando, and then I've got almost 2 years worth of schooling in Orlando. And Stanley Roberts gets drafted the year before Shaq by Orlando. So we're going to games. I'm watching Stanley Roberts, and then at the same time, you're hearing about Shaq because Shaq was kind of the heir to what Stanley Roberts was at LSU. And so we're watching Shaq, and he is just dominating. And it's kind of like what we've heard with Wembanyama, what we heard with Tim Duncan, what we heard with David Robinson, like all these great big men, Ralph Sampson over the years, that kind of hype. Patrick Ewing at Georgetown, the same thing, right? Like all this hype. And then we're watching all these replays, and we were getting a little bit of LSU games in Orlando, so you could watch a few of them on TV, not too many. But just this guy was kind of like, my favorite guy was, of course, Barkley. And so now you have this dude who is like 6-7 inches taller and as big and strong and as agile at Barkley, but at that size. And so I left and went to my next school just before he actually would start with the Magic. But just watching him, and then of course the finals against the Rockets, where Jordan takes his sabbatical, whatever we want to call it, and then the Rockets win. But I mean, in that one where the Magic, lose and Anderson ends up missing the free throws at the end of the game, and you have a young Penny Hardaway. Like, we were watching those early teams. We were watching them, Scott Skiles and, those guys. Greg Kite was the center for that team. I mean, you talk about just big, tall, white guy that goes down low and just mix it up. I mean, that was Greg Kite. So those were the teams that we were watching in Orlando when I was there. And then just Shaquille, when he came out, right, that was kind of the height of where hip hop starts becoming mainstream. And I was always into hip hop before, so now it was like becoming more popular and people were liking it. So just that kind of clash of culture. And then just think of Shaquille brought what he's doing now, what he was doing then to now, and how he came into the league. And if you would have had all the social media and everything else going on, I mean, how much bigger would have that have been? So he was kind of a big deal. I was never like a big Shaquille fan. I wasn't a hater either, but on those early Orlando teams, it was really fun to watch.
You raise a good point. Like, given where the league is today, it's not a league set up for. It's not based on his style of play, right? Like he's not shooting 3-pointers by any means. He did show at moments he can handle the ball dribbling, but not like really handling the ball dribbling. Like he's incredibly dominant, but not the style of big man today. But if he did come out today with his exact same skills then, I wonder if he would change the league completely into the direction of big guy down low who can just dominate. The same way that Steph Curry, when he helped transform the league into we can just shoot a ton of threes and now everyone can shoot threes. So I hadn't thought about that, but in a way, I think that's an interesting kind of thought of like what impact, as we talk about this whole bracket being about impact. I bet Shaq would have had even more impact on the league if he came out today, given how dominant he was and how much he changed the league, even when he came out, when centers were kind of playing that game anyway, he still was so dominant and influential to the league. So I don't know. What do you think about that, Steve?
I think it's an interesting point. I think that if Shaq were to come in the league now, he would change things. If he was on the right team with the right coach, kind of like, Steph got, and they could fashion an offense that allowed him to play low post, because no one could guard him. So he'd be dominant. But, now the inclination is 3 first, then 2. I think it'd be really interesting to see a guy like Shaq come in the league now. I mean, we talked about this last year. My sleeper pick last year was that big guy from Purdue, Zach Edey, and they had him dropping out. I said, he'll be a good player if he's on the right team. He gets doubles before he got hurt. He got doubles, and he's like a 10th or a 20th of the guy Shaq was. So, and then he doesn't shoot beyond 5 or 6 feet out. So if Shaq were in the league now on just an average team, he would tear the league up. And then how they reacted to it would be interesting. And that'd be the whole thing about, it's so much better to shoot 3s than 2s. Now when Shaq's shooting 2s, he would change the game. Now, of course, his Achilles heel would be foul shooting. Yeah. But boy, it'd be fun to watch a dominant low post player who didn't have an outside game.
Yeah.
Well, Zach,
his field goal percentage would be like 800. It would just be incredible. You know what I mean? Like he would just be dunking on everybody. It would be like the dunk on Chris Dudley every single play, just like completely just slamming over someone and throwing them down, just because of how different the league is today. I think it would be really interesting to watch, because he was still just so dominant even then against these big, strong guys down low. And just given it's been now 15, 20 years of kids growing up playing more the style of the NBA right now, that it would be, I think, a real shock to the NBA system to have a guy like Shaq come out today.
Well, and they're doing Hack-a-Shaq and all that other stuff, getting double, triple teamed, and his career shooting percentage is almost 60%. Zach Edey this year is 63%.
Wow.
So, I mean, to Steve's point, he plays today. I think you're right, Mark. He's shooting 70, 80%. So when you start tilting the floor like that with that kind of percentage, and you can't double and triple team like they did before. So if you just do the math, right, 70% of a 2, that's better than 40% of a 3. So that tilts the floor quite a bit.
Yeah, it would really, the league would have to make a lot of changes. Part of how we assessed Shaq being on this list and where he was on this list in this tournament was on the rules, where if the league is creating rules because of you made an impact, right? And so they did. Teams devised whole strategies against him, and then the league had to adjust the rules a little bit. In a way, the game would be incredibly exciting right now with him in it, but also really boring because it would just be nonstop fouls. And so they would have to figure out a way to really work around that because it would just be unbearable to watch, the 12th guy on the bench come in and just, rack up 6 fouls in 6 possessions.
Right. Right. All right. So finishing off the Elite Eight, we have number one, Arizona, and that's represented by Babe Ruth. And then you have number two, Purdue, which is LeBron. And so Arizona kind of went through number 16, Roger Federer, represented by Long Island. They beat Pete Rose, Charlie Dirty. If you listen to one of our recent posts on the YouTube, you'll find out why I think he's more Charlie Dirty than Hustle. But he was represented by Utah State. And then just recently, Arizona took down number 4, Arkansas, which was Shohei Ohtani. So you've got Babe Ruth against LeBron. LeBron took down OJ, who was Texas, number 11. And then they took down Joe Louis, who was represented by Miami of Florida. And then they also, in the first round, you had LeBron take down Abby Wambach, who was the number 15 seed at Queens. So Babe Ruth, none of us watched him play. I have my tilted view of Babe Ruth. I still think he's great, but Mark, he was a Yankee.
Yeah.
He played for your team, so how do you guys? I know you guys revere him, but
Well, I'll
go
tell you
at
a
it.
different I'll tell you a different story of the impact he made. So, I live north of the Bronx, maybe like 25 minutes away. He liked to play golf and wanted access to a club, a course, country club to play in. So he worked it out with a country club to have an exit right off of one of the parkways where the country club was. And basically, they built this exit for him, and it still exists. And it is a tunnel, small tunnel, but it can only fit one car at a time. So we have to wait. And so it's the longest light ever because you have to wait for each direction to go through one at a time. But it's, this little Babe Ruth, uh, you know, um, symbol here that, that's the impact he had. The impact was you can have your own exit on a parkway, and you don't even have to build it big enough for 2 cars. One seems fine. So that's a little different from baseball, but just other kind of impact and sway he had,
That's big time.
right?
So, Steve, I mean, you're not old enough to have seen him play, but you've heard the stories. Anything jump out for you for Babe?
Well, just like what Mark said. I mean, Yankee Stadium was called the house that Ruth built. I mean, he had his own persona and bigger than life persona, and it changed baseball in a lot of ways. I was around to see it. I mean, he was always the standard, and it's one of these things where since no one I knew had ever seen him, I don't think any even parents I knew had ever seen him play. It was just myth and stuff, but the myth was pretty amazing. I think one year he hit more home runs than the rest of the players in the league combined, and so he's obviously phenomenal, and his name meant baseball for the longest time. I mean, I know you could make the argument that since baseball wasn't integrated back then, he may not have been playing against the best players, et cetera, et cetera. But the dominance he had in his sport was kind of unparalleled, and that's hard to go around. Now, competing against LeBron, who I'm actually a big fan of in a lot of ways. I mean, LeBron must have this drive that's incredible because he's the way he's playing at his age. I mean, I know we just talked about Muhammad getting pummeled by Larry Holmes and Willie stumbling around the outfield. I mean, LeBron's still playing at a very high level. Maybe not the level he was playing 10 years ago, but he's a smart player. He does his thing, and the other thing is, his empire he's building, and I mean, I realize he's a little funky with his connection with the Clutch agency, but he's changed things, and he's changed, I think, how players are viewed. He's changed the whole dynamic, owner player. I understand he and his people, Maverick Card and these other guys are coming up with this other league, this world league. I'm not sure what it is, but I know for women it's one thing, but he's an entrepreneur of a kind we haven't seen even. Although I mean, you can't really do Michael Jordan because Michael is pretty amazing in his own right. But LeBron is really doing it, and then he had the fact that he had to assist to his kid last night. He threw a pass to Bronny for a 3-pointer. I mean that that's one of the things. So I'm probably I mean I think it might be kind of biased with immediacy and stuff. But I think LeBron against Babe, I take LeBron's influence in so many other ways. Although, at the time, Babe was probably a bigger character in terms of society and in terms of his comings and goings. But I don't think they went much past the debauchery and baseball. LeBron kind of covers a lot of angles.
So here's the current conspiracy theory that's happening right now. LeBron has a 250 million salary slot, and so the current theory that's going around the Angelinos. So those that don't know, Steve and I both live down in Southern California, but there's talk that with his salary slot that they'd be able to go after the Joker or Giannis, and then LeBron will extend a year for like the minimum. So we'll see if there's any truth to any of that. This is the Lakers. They always seem to pull these types of things out of the hat. They somehow get, Luka. They somehow get Shaq. They somehow get Kareem. They somehow get, all these guys. So we'll see what happens. Kobe's another example. But our last two guys, we have Tom Bradley, your former mayor of Los Angeles, the international terminal's named after him, former Michigan quarterback, also represented by #1 Michigan. And then you have the other, Bill Russell, represented by #6 Tennessee. So Tennessee got past Virginia, which was Steph Curry, #3. And they got past Bobby Orr, which was Miami of Ohio. And then Michigan, of course, they took down Alabama. That was Dr. J, one of my favorites, #4. And then they took down my alma mater, #9 St. Louis with Larry Blur, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But Charles Barkley was representing the SLU Billikens. And then Michigan took down Howard early on, which was also one of my favorites. Your favorite, my favorite, Will Clark. Tom Brady, Mark. I mean, grew up in New York. You're not a Jets fan, but Jets fans. Tom Brady, lay it down.
Yeah. Well, first, who took out Michael Jordan in this? What
Michael Jordan was Florida.
Did I miss him?
Yeah, Michael Jordan was Florida, and they got taken down by Shaq.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Just wanted to make sure we covered that. Okay. So, look, I as a Giants fan, I am fortunate where the Giants played the Patriots twice in the era of Tom Brady in the Super Bowl and won. And so I'm not saying that to rub it in. I'm just saying like I don't have hard feelings. I don't hate the Patriots like other teams. It's hard to really you can hate them or whatever, but I don't see with him, what I loved watching was how it really felt like a machine. Where you can just slot somebody else in, next guy up, wide receiver, and the machine, the system kept going. And you really felt it with that team more than other teams in terms of having a real system. And so sometimes I think that then overshadowed Tom Brady, and then they would say, well, it's the system, it's not him. You could put any quarterback in there and that would be the case. But that's obviously not true. And I think as time went on, you saw more of that. As he went to Tampa, you saw the reality of it. I think even when you saw when Randy Moss went to the Patriots, you saw whoa, this is the system plus, right? This is where it just became like a video game. In terms of the stats that both Tom Brady and Randy Moss put up. And I think, again, it was just proving okay, this isn't just, you could put any average quarterback into this, and you would have a winning team. This is like, okay, they've got real talent, and when there's talent, not just at quarterback, but you have an elite wide receiver at the same time. Look what can happen. So I think you know incredibly impactful. I think it's cool to see him try to have this second career in media, and I think he's learning as he goes. I think he's getting a little bit better. Um, but I think it's cool. I just saw a headline though that he was asking the league, contemplating coming back, and the league wasn't interested in that. I think it's good that he's not coming back. I mean, it's a physical sport, like you can't step away for a few years and then come back, and like I wouldn't want to see that with him. I would rather just have the memories of even his time in Tampa was obviously really great, and that was a risk also, right? Because sometimes you see these guys who are legends in one team do the final year or two coda in another team, and it just fails miserably, and this was just not the case here, and so I would rather just end it that way than see more. Steve, what do you think?
Well, I think it's incredibly interesting, Tom Brady versus Bill Russell, because I think it's a great case study of how we've changed as a society and what is expected of sports athletes or not. You can't deny the greatness of either of them. They're phenomenal athletes and competitors, and just amazing. Brady strikes me as, I don't think he meant it necessarily in a negative way, and I think I might a little bit very robotic, and I think it's this, not just I'm going to work hard and try and succeed. It's, if I rule out every other distraction in my life and I have every meal, transcribed to what it's going to do and all these things, there'll be success. And I realize that, what I know of Tom Brady and I know of Bill Russell is what I read and see, but Bill Russell to me seems like the kind of man who you could have a number of intelligent conversations with about politics, about society, about economic disparity, about social issues. I think he gave speeches on them. He was a very intelligent, articulate, thoughtful man. Brady seems to be driven by winning and making money. And I'm not putting that down because that's how it goes, but that's kind of how it strikes me nowadays. And now with the generational thing, Tom Brady in 1 year made probably 10 times what Bill Russell made in his career, just because of the difference in economics now. But it strikes me that I think back then, if you look at the guys we picked from the '60s, whether it's Russell or Jim Brown, whatever, they had different facets to them. Tom Brady, and I was a fan. I liked watching New England. He went to Michigan where my dad went. I like that. But the more and more I hear about him and watch what he does, it's. I mean, this latest thing, the flag football controversy and the duel with Logan Paul, one of these things, it's just WWE. And I mean, it's like, really? I mean, it strikes me like when I watch Kurt Russell or one of these guys doing a commercial, like, how much money do you need? Do you really need to sell, beer or shaving cream? It's just kind of ridiculous. That's my thought on Tom Brady. So as good as he was as a player, which is undeniable, and I agree with Mark, I'd hate to see him come back and be incredibly stupid. But I think in terms of how much they impacted things, I think Bill Russell as a man, as a human being, as a player is off the charts. So I would give Russ the edge, not even by a close margin, by a huge margin.
So, what are
So
your thoughts on Brady? I know we're almost out of time, but I want to hear yours.
yeah, but when it comes to Tom Brady, I want him to just go away. Like pick a profession, pick a whatever you want. I don't want this. Are you an announcer? Are you part owner of the Raiders? I don't think he's helping whatever happened, what is happening at the Raiders. And as someone who's a recovering Raider fan, I just don't. I don't know what's going on. So pick a lane and stick with it. This, like Steve's saying, it's just too much. It's saturation. It's like, dude, really, you need to be that in the public eye with every single thing that you do? Like, come on, give me a break. You have more money than you'd ever need. You have a great life. live your life, have a great old time, and leave me out of it. So I don't want to see any of it. And then I'll leave you with this with Bill Russell. When I was in high school, Bill Russell was the coach of our Sacramento Kings. And he drafted out of Louisville, because Steve said it wrong earlier, it's Louisville. Out of Louisville, and number 1 overall, he drafted your Never Nervous Purvis, which was a terrible pick, because he was like, hey, that guy is just like me. And it turned out he quite wasn't. So, Steve, shepherd us on out.
Well, I'll just say this. Tom Brady may or may not turn the Raiders around, but he'll never be a good announcer. If he could be a good announcer, he could be an actor. He's just too robotic. The stuff he says. I watch a lot of games. I understand how, the Tony Romos can do the thing for a while, or the John Maddens. It gets old, but Brady doesn't have it now. He's made improvements from his thing, but I'm with you, Jonathan. Just, really, if you wanna try and turn the Raiders around, give it your shot, but leave us out of it. So I think the matchups coming up are good. We're Saturday in the West Coast, Saturday afternoon, getting ready for some games, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think we've touched on a lot of topics that are kind of interesting. Just obviously just our opinions, but are the players of the '60s and '70s, were they deeper? Were they more thoughtful? Were they more socially conscious? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows if they'd had the economic opportunities thrown their way? But it's good fun talking about it. But I'll just say I'm not a Tom Brady big fan anymore, and I think the legacy of Bill Russell will go a lot longer than the legacy of Tom Brady. So that's all I got. So everybody have a nice weekend, be safe, and we'll see you next week. Are we going to continue on the brackets, Jonathan?
I think this is probably the end. I think we've said our piece. We'll give them an update on who actually wins, but that was a 3-minute way for you to say see you next time. We were just
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, you can cut that all out. All right, everybody have a nice weekend.
No, we got to
See you
keep it
next
all.
time.